Hello everyone. We're really, really excited to be here. We've both got our beverage. We hope you've got a beverage as well. We've gone for tea and coffee this time rather than a glass of wine. It felt like a tea and coffee day, didn't it? Really,
It's a tea and coffee day for us.
Yeah.
It's a tea and coffee day. Yeah,
Definitely for you because we recorded this yesterday, which it's going to feel a little bit strange watching this back
which
live.
feels strange saying now because obviously
Yeah,
today is today for us.
exactly.
But when you're watching this streamed, this will have happened yesterday.
Yes, and the reason is Emma is very excitedly in Sweden.
I am in Sweden. I'm in the northern parts of Sweden in the Arctic, hence the beanie. This isn't just cost of living crisis. This is because where I am is quite cold. And I'm working at a functioning research station, which is quite a noisy place to be, and I cannot guarantee that it will be quiet or I will have such a lovely map-adorned room available tomorrow at the right time. So we're just hopping on now to chat about all things traitors. So that we've got a clear run without being disturbed by fellow scientists doing important climate change research, which is obviously not nearly as important as us being part of Cardiff Science Festival.
Of course not. So we hope you enjoy. Sit back, get your beverage in hand, and get ready for our live performance.
We will be on. We will be in the chat on YouTube actually while you're watching this. So if you do want to say hello, although we can't say hello to you in video form, we'll be in the chat. Drop us any questions, and we'll get back to you.
Yeah. Okay. Ready to start?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Marvelous. Okay. Hello and welcome to Small Screen Science, the podcast where we explore the silly science hidden behind our favourite TV shows. I'm Karen.
I'm Emma, and hold on to your hoods, folks, because today we're pulling up a seat at the round table to chat about the BBC's hugely popular TV show, very new, Traitors.
Yeah, it was a bit of a slow burn, wasn't it? But it proved very, very popular.
It took over Twitter, though,
absolutely
at the end of last year.
Yeah, very exciting. And we're delighted, of course, to be back at Cardiff for the third year in a row. So thank you very much, Cardiff, for inviting us back. It's very, very exciting. And we love doing this festival. It's good fun.
It is. So on to Traitors then, if you missed it last year. So just before Christmas, Claudia Winkleman hosted this brand new reality TV show in which I think 22 contestants, they went to Scotland. They basically lived in a castle in the Scottish Highlands and they competed to win a lump of cash, as is the crux of pretty much every reality TV show these days. So essentially, most of them are told that they are what's known as faithful, but a handful of them are told that they are traitors. And the aim is to make it to the final episode where they all split the winnings. But every episode, somebody gets kind of kicked out or murdered. And if any of the traitors make it to the end, they steal all the money. But if only faithfuls make it to the end, they get all the money. So the faithfuls have to weed out the traitors, and they all get to sort of sit around this very intense round table in the evenings. And they've all done a lot of bitching, a lot of gossiping. And they think, okay, well, I'm going to name this person a traitor, so we're going to evict them. And then they find out whether the person they have evicted was or wasn't a traitor. And it all just gets incredibly tense. And my favorite bit, I have to admit, was the sort of it wasn't the sort of psychological banishment of people. It was the kind of sports day meets corporate retreat bonding activities that every day they would have to do, because they're in the Highlands, they've got to fill their days somehow. But they made them compete in all these really weird and wonderful activities in order to boost that prize pot at the end of things. So that's my top level summary of Traitors.
It's amazing, absolutely amazing concept of a program. And actually it was first released in the Netherlands, I think. Was it in the Netherlands?
Yeah, it was.
So yeah. And of course the BBC bought up the rights straight away because it just sounds amazing.
BBC loved it.
Yeah.
BBC loved it. Yeah.
So it's a really addictive mix. There's lots of suspicion and paranoia, sociopathy, and audience were absolutely obsessed. And I think it also helps that we know who the traitors are, and it's about watching them trying to work out who it is. There's kind of that murder mystery element.
There's a lot of kind of hitting your head on the table going like, no, how did you not see this person lying? Or oh my god, that person's such a good liar. Yeah, I think in the way of all good reality TV shows, even though I don't really like reality TV shows, in the way of all the reality TV shows that hit the mark, it's the very beginning, it's the first series where people don't know what the concept is going to be, they don't know the format. And that's when you're like, oh my god, how is this even working? So nobody's gone into the show thinking I'm going to get famous and this is going to be my strategy because I've seen it play out previously. So I think that really had it kind of that was a really big thing for it over Christmas. Everybody was like, what the hell is this TV show that Claudia Winkleman is fronting and has suddenly gone mad on Twitter? You know, people were calling each other Ted Bundy around the red table. Like it was really, really mad. But did you watch it?
I watched a little bit of it. Yeah. I wasn't one of these people who caught it from the beginning. I really envy those people because that's just amazing. And it's quite interesting the way you talk about it, because apparently the American version's completely different, because they picked reality TV star types who'd already been on reality TV, were already in that kind of zone, and knew kind of what to expect in terms of, I'm on a reality TV show, we're competing with each other, which is completely different to the British version. So those of you who are fans of the British version, watch a few of the episodes of the US version and have a look at what the difference is between the two.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't really aware of it, and I came home for Christmas in like the week before Christmas, and my mum was like, we've got to have dinner at this time, so we've got to watch Traitors. I was like, what the hell is Traitors? And she was completely obsessed with it. She absolutely loved it right from the beginning. And then we watched the final maybe 2 or 3 episodes with her, which was really useful because she knew everything. So all of my silly questions, she could be like, well, this person's done this, and this person's now a traitor, and they backstabbed this person. So then I caught up on some of the good bits for this podcast, and I thought, well, I'll just have a quick look at what the American Traitors was like. And it was horrible. There was so much like ego, I'm going to win. It was so cliched, stereotypically American in all the negative ways that I was like, I can't handle this, I'm too British. at least with the UK Traitors, everybody was like, oh no, but babes, we're all best friends, don't worry, we'll be best friends at the end of this. And then like the American one, everybody was like, I'm going to win, obviously.
Yes. I'm going to do everything in my power to win.
Can't handle it.
Yeah. And I think what's really good about the British version, the UK version, is that there was that couple in it that were a secret couple as well, just that added little little like bit
pretending not to be a couple, and then the fact that they got found out like just made them look so suspicious. I can totally see like their initial logic, but it really didn't do them any favors, I don't think.
Well, no, because it's quite a big lie, because it's like people are saying, well, I didn't realize, which means you're really good at lying, which means I need to be really suspicious of you.
Yeah. Do you think you'd be good on the show? We always ask each other this when we look at a TV show. Do you think you'd be good at Traitors?
I would love to do the murder mystery, trying to work out who it is. But actually, I think I would be quite a good traitor as well, because as a teacher, you have a persona that you put on in the classroom, which isn't necessarily the same as the persona that you have in real life. So if it's similar to that, I might be quite good. But I don't know if I've got tells, you see. That's the thing. If I lie, have I got tells? I
don't know. I honestly don't know. I know you quite well, and I don't know if I would know. I think if I was ever to tell if you were lying, it would be based on context rather than tell. I think I'd be like, well, I know your life quite well, and that doesn't fit, as opposed to being like, you've blinked 7 times. But, I mean, I think I'd be rubbish. I think I would like to think that I'd be good at working out who was good, but in reality, I'm not actually confident in my skills. I think I'd be better at the sort of school sports day bit than the deception and espionage.
See, I'd be rubbish at that, because I did one of those. Have you ever heard of the Crystal Maze? It would have been before your time, but it was rebooted, wasn't it?
I did the London Crystal Maze experience a few months ago. Oh, fantastic fun.
Yeah, good fun, but I was rubbish at it. I could do the things, but really, really slowly. And there was one room that was a mystery room, which was all set up, and you had to try and figure out what it was. I'd got no idea at all. I was looking around the room trying to find clues. And if I'd been in there for like 10 minutes, I'd have been fine. But of course, it's like 2 or 3 minutes, isn't it? Absolutely rubbish.
And everybody's watching you, and you've got
exactly, and they're shouting and pointing at things. Yeah, rubbish. Absolutely rubbish. I was at it. So maybe I'd be better off as traitor.
Okay. Maybe I'd quite like to be Claudia Winkleman, actually, just hang out in Scotland, eating shortbread, just like dropping bombs of confusion. I would much rather be her, I think.
But just being Claudia generally, because that means you get to do Strictly as well, which would be great.
You would love that. That would be. I'd love to, and I would love to see you host Strictly. Actually, I would love to see the BBC. I'd love to see us host Strictly.
Do you know, that would be amazing. Let's get
listeners,
it done.
Somebody must know somebody at the BBC. Listen, Tess and Claudia are great, but they need some fresh, more authentic, common as muck meat that can be us.
That'll
Okay,
be us. We do a
right.
great job.
we're really digressing already. We always do this when we're excited to be at science festivals. Listen, we're not the only ones who have tried to imagine whether we could put ourselves in the traitors' shoes. And traitors go hand in hand with spies. We've covered spies a fair bit before at Small Screen Science, but we are going to cover a little bit more again. And YouGov has done some fun polls on things like spying.
Yeah, and believe it or not, 40% of Britons think they'd make a good spy if they were trained properly. That's quite a caveat at the end. If you were trained properly.
So 60% of people think even if they were trained, they'd do a rubbish
they
job.
wouldn't be a good spy.
Which I enjoy. Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. And then about 50% think they'd be keen to work for the UK Secret Service. Now that's really interesting, isn't it? But I think that is definitely a Bond thing, isn't it?
I think so, yeah. I mean, about 50% of people also thought it would be cool to do so.
Yeah.
And I 100% think that that's just because James Bond has sort of sexified the idea of secret intelligence and that kind of clandestine world. I think in reality, with absolutely no experience of it myself, I think the reality of it would be much more sort of miserable. I guess there's like a sense of patriotism, but you're doing something important, but you can't tell anyone what you're doing, really. I would imagine you're stressed all the time. You've got this kind of delineation between family and you're lying in all directions. There's so much risk. It sounds like a lonely world to me. Doesn't sound very cool.
But having said that, I walked past the MI6 building a couple of weeks ago because I was going to a meeting along that road. And it was just like ordinary people wandering in and out, I mean, there were like a million cameras, but, it's just... that MI6 building is definitely a weird place, just stuck there in the middle of London. Everybody knows what it is. All those people who work for the Secret Service wandering in and out, everybody knows they work for the Secret Service because you're going in and out the building. They've got like accountants and
stuff, haven't they, I imagine?
Exactly. But they've all signed the official Secrets Act.
Maybe that's all part of the ruse. Maybe all the big stuff happens elsewhere.
Yeah, this is true. Who knows?
Who knows? Sign us up.
Yes. Well, 40% of people think, 50% of people think they'd love to do it. So, hey-ho.
So, I mean, I think it's important to maybe before we go off on too much of like a spy tangent, the distinction between spies and traitors is that a traitor will turn against their allegiances.
Yes.
So, we're talking about like traitors in terms of like your country, you start selling secrets to Russia, perhaps. That's come up in the news recently. But in this sense, the traitors are turning against their fellow game show competitors.
Yeah. But they're only kind of like immersed in that world for a very short period of time, aren't they? So they're not going to get all the traumatized experience that a spy is going to end up with and all of that emotional baggage. And you would perceive it. Well, you'd perceive it as a game, wouldn't you? I think I guess when there's an end.
Yeah, that's true.
And when the end is going to be.
Well, not necessarily, because you might be murdered in the night.
That's true. Yes.
Or convicted.
The longest period of time.
True of both careers. Spying and traitors. Should we get into some science?
Yes, let's get into some science. So the science of deception and lies is a good place to start, I think, isn't it?
Definitely. Yeah.
And let's go to the Netherlands, because that's where the program started. And the University of Amsterdam carried out a study, and it won the Ig Nobel Prize, because we love to look at the Ig Nobel Prizes, don't we?
Ig Nobels. This is silly pub science, genuine science, but on a quite kind of nonsensical whim for those of you who haven't encountered the Ig Nobels before.
Yes, and definitely worth a look. This one in 2019, and it looked at how our age plays a role in lying. And in terms of how good we are at it, how often we do it. And what they did, now this is quite amusing, they got 1,000 liars together. These liars were aged between 6 and 77, and they asked them,
spread.
How often do you lie? Then they had to decide whether or not to believe the liar or not. And they looked at lying proficiency as well as their reaction time while lying. So they had to do a particular activity while they were lying. And of course, if the reaction time was longer, that suggested
I think the reaction time, I thought the reaction time was like how long they were thinking about the lie.
Okay. There was another study where they did an actual activity, and they were looking at the reaction time while they were doing that activity at the same time as lying.
So interestingly, they found that your lying proficiency, or like your accuracy, improved through your childhood. But the younger you were, like the longer a reaction time you had. So it was kind of like the more time you were sort of thinking about what you were going to say and what your lie might be. And then as you got into young adulthood, your reaction time got better, as well as your lying, your lying proficiency.
Yeah.
So teenagers, perhaps.
So yeah, teenagers, young adults are the best at lying, which I guess is, again, it's that persona thing, isn't it? Because as a young person, you're still exploring who you are, and you're trying to kind of match yourself to other groups of young people and say, well, I'm like you, so therefore I'm going to do what you do, and to form into a group, into a party. So maybe that makes sense, actually. While you're still discovering who you are and getting the confidence to be you, you are imitating other small groups in order to fit in, aren't you? So that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, spoken like a true
teenage
true teacher.
Yeah. And of course, that this is the age at which they lied the most as well. So not only were they good at lying at that age, they lied the most at that age. So we're peak liars in our teenage years and young adulthood. Yeah.
So maybe that would make teenagers really good at being traitors.
Yes. So if you were around a round table, you would be most suspicious of the younger, kind of like, well, I will say 18, because I'm guessing they wouldn't have under 18s. That's the true. 18 to 22-year-olds, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yes, be most suspicious of them. So young people, 18 to 22, suspicious. Next group, sociopaths.
Yes, they might be very good at being a traitor. Yes. Yeah. So, I mean, how do we define a sociopath, right? This is quite tricky. So if you were looking at like a medical health professional diagnosis, you wouldn't diagnose someone with a sticker as a sociopath. It's more likely to come under the banner of an antisocial personality disorder. Yeah.
And sociopaths are often very charming and very charismatic on the surface, but they can't always connect with other people. So they lack that kind of empathy. And they sometimes show a disregard for other people and can be more dishonest, which as a traitor is really, really useful. So they're comfortable lying on a regular basis, and they can continue to lie and backpedal if they're caught, rather than coming clean and saying, oh, you got me. They'll keep backpedaling and try and justify what they've said and that kind of thing. And quite often emotionally absent. So, if you say something to them that you'd expect someone else to have an emotional response to, they won't have an emotional response to that. And they're able to lie very, very quickly and manipulate to get what they want.
So if you were looking out for, if a sociopath was a traitor, you would be looking out for someone who backpedals like crazy when you try and you think you've got something on them, and also someone that doesn't care in the morning when they reveal who has been murdered in the night. There was a lot of kind of emotional stuff at the breakfast table when they would be like, oh, so and so was murdered in the night, and then everybody else would realize that they'd been gone from the game. There would be a lot of, oh my god, my best friend. So you'd need someone that was either a really good actor or just like didn't care that they'd gone. You could be on the watch for that. But I mean, another thing is that in a lot of situations, sociopaths are actually very kind of cool and calm, and if you can't kind of mask that can be something that can quite often frighten other people. So again, that could be another tell if you're up against a sociopath that's in a traitorous role in this TV show. So ideally, if you know you're a sociopath and you've been tapped on the shoulder and you're a traitor, what you need to do is use those strengths, but also you need to be able to mask them. The best technique seems to be blending in with the group.
Yes.
You don't want to stand out as a good liar, basically.
Yeah. And I think it's worth at this point kind of talking about the difference between a sociopath and a psychopath. And this all boils down to psychopaths having no sense or regard for right and wrong, while sociopaths do recognize right or wrong. So that's the main difference. So we know it's right or wrong, but we're going to do it anyway, which in a way is that it is more scary.
Probably useful. And scary.
Yeah. I know it's wrong, but I'm going to do it anyway.
On we go.
Yes.
There is prize money to win.
Yeah. So when we did our Killing Eve podcast episode, we actually talked about psychopaths quite a lot, and we talked about Hare's psychopathy test. So if you're interested in psychopathy and how to tell if someone's a psychopath or not, and Hare's test, have a listen back to that one. But the actual test says that people who are psychopaths have no sense of morality or empathy. So I can't imagine that that ruthlessness would be useful in traitors, because blending in is the important thing, isn't it? So if you were ruthless and you didn't recognize that what you were doing was wrong and just brazened it out, I think you'd be less likely to be able to mask that, perhaps. So I think a sociopath might be better than a psychopath in that situation.
So if you have a look at Wilf, who was the last traitor to reach the final, and oh my God, he did so well. He blended in with the others so well. He tried so hard not to stick out at any point. He was a little bit ruthless when required. There was a little bit of traitory backstabbing when he got somebody else evicted. But you know, he did manage to make it to the very end by blending in. It was only kind of right in the last episode when he sort of, the cracks began to show, and one of the other contestants, Hannah, suddenly went, "Oh, that was weird from you. Hang on, I think I'm suspicious." And if she hadn't, I think he would have gone on to win the whole thing. But he did incredibly well by blending in.
Yeah, being one of the group. And the ruthlessness, I mean, we talked about it, didn't we? The US version, they are much more ruthless. There's less of that friendship. And actually, I guess if you're going into it and everybody's being ruthless, you are still hiding, because you're still hiding in the group, aren't you? Because everybody's reacting in the same way. So yeah, so it's quite interesting that these friendships in the British version seem to be genuine, whereas the American ones, not so much.
Yeah, no. I'm not sure I want to watch that version. There was enough drama in the British one for me. It stressed me out watching that one. I don't need any more. It's
quite interesting though, isn't it? Because, you know, there's a lot of people are desperate for a second series, but the problem is everybody knows the format now. So
they're going to have to do something completely different.
Yeah. How do you do it for a second series?
I mean, I got to admit, one of my favourite shocks of the whole thing was right at the very beginning when Claudia asked everyone to line up outside the castle from like most likely to think they're going to win to like least likely to think they're going to win, and then the two guys who like put themselves at the rear end, who were like, yeah, no, we're probably not going to win, who were, I'll be very honest, some of the most confident ones. She was like, cool, well, you don't think you're going to win, you two you're out immediately. That blew my mind.
Oh my goodness.
It was so good. I mean, they came back later in another twist of fate. But I think to make another series work, it's going to have to hinge on so many things like that.
Yeah.
To disrupt the gameplay from what people think they know. Because, everybody's going to come in with such an agenda.
Yeah, and have worked out a gameplay. And I think that's the problem with a lot of reality TV shows, is the first series is very impactful, very new, very nuanced, and then after that everybody's on a game, everybody's worked out let's try this strategy, that strategy, and see if we can win. It's not quite the same. So lying, it's very clear that lying is absolutely key to being a traitor, and we talked about
science of lying.
We talked about tells, didn't we, and the fact that I don't know if I've got any tells or not. I do know I think I would be rubbish at poker, but I do have a teacher face, which is close to a poker face, which is one of those ones where you just look and you wait for the child to just basically talk themselves into a hole and crack. Yes. It's just, so maybe that's the same thing, I don't know.
Okay.
So these tells or ticks are things that you do when you're lying, when you don't realize it, and there are some common ones that we do, aren't there?
There are indeed. I think so. One of the most famous ones is Bill Clinton. When he denied his affair with Monica Lewinsky, he touched his nose and people went mad and they said, oh heavens, he's touched his nose, that means he's a liar. And that's quite a common tell that people it's not like, tells aren't okay, you have touched your nose, therefore you are definitely lying. Tells are more, oh okay, maybe there's a bit more of a correlation between this activity and the lie being told. So you can't just go around being like, well, you looked at the ceiling instead of making eye contact, and you tugged your earlobe, so you've lied to me. But there are certain things, like I said, that are more commonly associated with being lies. So it's things like rapid blinking, chewing your lip, which when I read that I was worried, because I do that all the time, just as a sign that I'm thinking. But also like your nostrils flaring and deep breathing. But of course you kind of have to be quite close to someone, I think, to see them. I was going to try and make my nostrils flare, and I don't know, but you do have to be quite close contact to be able to tell how deep someone's breathing, whether that's shifted or whether their nostrils are flaring, I think.
Well, yeah, because imagine if you're sitting around a table with 12 people and you're trying to listen to the people next to you to see if is that breathing changed or not. That's not going to be possible. I mean,
the round table is a big old table. You can't see that. I think that's a good point.
Yeah, and then we can look into someone's eyes too. So you might think that it's hard to keep eye contact when you're lying, but generally, if we're thinking back and trying to remember something visual, we tend to look up. So if you're trying to remember, you tend to break eye contact, look up to remember the thing that you're trying to remember. So if somebody's keeping eye contact with you all the time, then they're not having to think about what they're saying. So the likelihood is they're lying.
Or they're more likely to be able to maintain eye contact. I mean, having done podcasts with you over video for several years now, I've definitely noticed that. I immediately I cannot look at you when I'm trying to remember what it is I'm supposed to be saying. I very, very quickly look up, and it's interesting to hear that that's kind of the dredging up of a visual memory. But yeah. So, I mean, linguists have also looked at liars and lies, and it's been noticed that liars will often create sort of a distance between themselves and the lie. So, for example, they'll stop using words like mine, I, me, and my, and that kind of thing. And in some cases, they'll even refer to themselves in the third person, which is always interesting. But all of that is to kind of push themselves away from whatever it is they're telling, to kind of untangle themselves from it if they know that it's not true. And some researchers were actually able to also spot these things called micro expressions in people who were asked to lie. And these are basically like a really quick flash of your true emotion, which lasted between 1/5 and 1/25 of a second. Not easy to spot. Not easy to spot. But a lot of the time it was hard for people to kind of control that. You still have this moment of before you lie.
But then sometimes we pick up on things like that, don't we, without realizing it? So you might think that someone's untrustworthy, but you can't figure out why you thought that, and it may be you're picking up some of these micro things, micro expressions. So all of this has got to be taken into with a pinch of salt, though, because obviously if I start, not looking up and keeping eye contact with you, it doesn't mean that I'm definitely lying.
No.
So it's about how you deviate from whatever your baseline is, because we're all different. So if we start deviating largely from what we would normally do, that's the likelihood that we're lying. So if you know someone, it can be easier to spot when they're lying. And that's there's something that was on Twitter, actually, talk about Twitter. They were talking about how mums can spot when you're lying. How on earth did they spot things when you were a child, when you were lying about things? And there's a whole thread on Twitter about mums spotting things, and that's what it'll be. It's because you would be deviating from your norm, and they will spot it because they know you really, really well.
So you don't want to go on Traitors with a parent?
No,
with your
not
parents
that knows you.
Or your partner or your best friend, unless you were both traitors, in which case that could actually be great fun.
Would actually work, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that would be good. There we go. I'll go on with you and we'll both be traitors.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
So but one of the other interesting things that scientists have found is that it's like listening to people might be easier to enable you to spot a lie. So actually, if you're watching someone lie, you get a lot more distracted by the visual cues. If you close your eyes at the round table and just listen to people lying, it's much easier for people to identify the sections that are a lie. And this goes as far as even if you're reading a transcript of a conversation, it's much easier to spot something that you think is a lie than if you're watching somebody, because it's harder to control your voice than it is your body language. For proficient liars, apparently the hardest thing for them to sort of hide is their voice when they're lying. So
isn't that
just sit there with your eyes closed? Yeah,
you see the fact that you can see it in a transcript is amazing.
Blows my mind.
Yeah, because you could understand if you're listening to it that you might spot changes in tone and speed of speech and that kind of thing. But to actually be able to read it is amazing. And as you said, it's because it's those visual cues, isn't it? So particularly if we're looking for those visual cues, we would get absolutely distracted by them, wouldn't we? And thinking about the body language.
If you're thinking, oh, did they lean back? Did they cross their arms? Has he touched his nose? All of that stuff. I think you'd end up looking for that, wouldn't you?
Yeah, they didn't look up when they said that, so how could they be remembering? You'd be lost in all of that, and you'd forget, wouldn't you?
Yeah. So one of the other techniques you can use is to add an element of surprise to catch a liar, apparently. Ooh. So I think they use this in like police interrogation stuff, maybe rather than around the round table, but asking someone to apparently explain like a sequence of events backwards is a really good way to sort of unearth the confusion, because if it is a lie, it'll make it so much harder for them to keep in the lie, because they've got to remember what they've told you and then remember it backwards, rather than just going, oh, okay, this, then this and this.
Oh, that's amazing, isn't it? Yeah. So I think that's enough about lies and lying. So big question. Have you got a trustworthy face?
I have no idea. No, I mean, in the chat, you can let us know whether you think Karen and I have 1 to 10 trustworthiness, rate our faces, but only on trustworthiness. I don't appreciate any other form of rating, please. And thank you. So I do know that we will judge a new face within 1/10 of a second. That is so fast.
Yeah,
and we'll make assumptions on things like whether they're extroverted, aggressive, caring, and trustworthy. So I think the structure of your face can be quite important, certainly.
Yeah, and actually a team of Czech researchers worked out which features make a face seem trustworthy. And it's all about the shape of the face as well as eye color, but also facial expressions as well. But the shape of the face is really key, which is interesting.
They did a really interesting study. So they showed 40 pictures of male faces and 40 pictures of female faces, all of them between 19 and 26. And they either had blue eyes or brown eyes. And then they asked participants to rate the trustworthiness of all of these faces. Yeah.
And apparently in men, brown eyes correlate with a face shape that's perceived as trustworthy. So brown eyes are important. And it's particularly true if they've got a broader chin and bigger features. So if you've got brown eyes, a broad chin and bigger features, then you're trustworthy. But men with blue
you're
eyes,
perceived as being trustworthy.
That's it.
You are not necessarily trustworthy.
This is true.
It means you can get away with stuff.
Whereas men with blue eyes were perceived as being less trustworthy than those with brown eyes. And blue eyes often went with a face shape that was more oval and with a longer chin, and smaller mouths and smaller eyes, so smaller features. And apparently these face shapes are associated with anger. So they're seen to be less trustworthy, which is interesting.
Weird, isn't it? So we'll all start looking at people differently. This is like when we talked about narcissistic eyebrows.
Yes.
In one of our previous episodes. But yeah, this is very much want to stress. This is perceived trustworthiness. This is not, okay, you've got blue eyes and a small chin, I can't trust the word you're saying.
I've got a big chin, so we're all right.
So that counteracts your blue eyes.
So Traitors was in many ways a twist on a whodunit story, wasn't it, basically? And whodunits are a real format that's enduring, from Agatha Christie, Sherlock Holmes, brilliant Netflix shows like Knives Out and Glass Onion. I did enjoy Glass Onion. It's a great title for a film, actually. Have a look at where they got the title from, because it's really, really good. So the question is, why do we love whodunit so much? Why is Agatha Christie so popular? Because she's
still a bestseller.
It's only Shakespeare in the Bible that have beat her, isn't it, in
really?
International bestsellers. Yeah.
Get in, Agatha. That is a good resume.
Yes.
So scientists have run some studies recently that actually might help us answer this question. So apparently a gripping mystery hinges on disgust, which may not be what you're expecting. I thought it would be more of like a curiosity. When I say that I like crime and those kind of things, I like the puzzle of it, is how I describe it. I would never have gone through the disgust channels, but apparently one study looked at kind of the opening scenes of TV shows, like TV crime dramas. And if they had like a really gruesome scene at the beginning, they found that viewers were more likely to persist through and be more invested in the overall content of the episode. And they found the story much more compelling, and they thought that it was most likely because then it sort of made it all the more sweet when the resolution came about. So when the person got served justice, when they were revealed, that arc was much stronger. So you've gone from this place of like, oh, gross, disgusting, to like, oh, thank God, this thing has happened and it's over.
It's been resolved. Now, obviously, the only murders in Traitors were fake ones, luckily. But there's thinking that the show maybe hinges on a different form of disgust, which is moral disgust. And often in dramas, you get some unlikable characters. And in reality shows as well, there's often one or more of those. And if you go back to the early days of Big Brother, there was Nasty Nick, for example. So we can feel this kind of moral disgust, and when we see people lying or manipulating or being selfish or greedy, then that's the appeal for us in terms of something like Traitors.
We basically like love to hate unpleasant characters, don't we? And this ties in quite a lot with one of our early episodes where we spoke to psychologists about why we like Love Island, and quite a lot of it is like, well, we do love to hate them, or we also see ourselves, we're kind of modeling ourselves on their social situations. It's quite easy to be like, oh my God, I would never have done things like that person did. Why have they done this? Why have they done that? And this format of show is perfect for showing off those traits of people. Of course, the editing does always show people in a certain light, but putting all these people in a room as like a big social experiment, it's such an easy way to show this moral disgust and just display everyone's different kind of ethical values and how they act. We love to hate people.
Absolutely. And we love in a whodunit that resolution at the end. And what's interesting is if a traitor wins, do we get that feeling? That would be interesting, wouldn't it? You know, is that interesting? How would we feel differently about, you know, people who are traitors versus people who are not traitors winning? How would we feel about that?
Because I think in the almost traitorous winner, Wilf, this year, I think people were really rooting for him as a person. Some of the other ones, not so much. There was a guy called Kieran who became a traitor near the end. I've not spoken to anyone who has rooted for that man. But Wilf, because he played a solid game, you could see your tactics, but he was also a nice person. He didn't appear to be ruthless. You know, he didn't decide to be a traitor. He just made the best of a situation that he was in. I think if he had won, I believe he should have won. I think he worked the hardest and did so phenomenally well. And the others that got to the final, well done. But I don't think they played a stronger game in this competition. But yeah, I don't know. I think maybe you're right. Maybe if it was a really unpleasant traitor and the resolution was that they won, people might come away from the game and think, what?
They'd be writing protests and things like that, complaining about it, getting it talked about in Parliament. So let's move away from lying then, and let's think about untrustworthiness, and let's think about being buried alive, which seems like a random term, doesn't it? But definite segue there.
It's definite segue. So this has all come about because it was one of the tasks that they had to do, where several of the contestants were buried alive. No, thank you. Only under like a foot of soil in a box which had ventilation, walkie-talkie, a light, microphones, all of this stuff. But the other contestants, their challenge was to kind of run around this castle's grounds finding clues to eventually find a key to unlock and dig out their fellow contestants. What a great idea. Absolutely terrifying. But we thought, hey, this is small screen science. We like to find the silly science behind a TV show. Let's have a look at the science behind being buried alive. How else are we, like, what other show are we going to get a chance to look at that?
Although, having said that, it does seem to be a theme of the longer running kind of murder mystery shows, doesn't it? Somebody getting buried alive. Didn't it happen in Silent Witness once? I'm sure it did.
Oh, you're right. It did. Nikki Alexander got buried alive. Yes. Yeah. And I think that's because we're all inherently very scared of it.
Yeah, and talking about being scared of it. Now, again, comedy value for all our regular listeners. I've got the difficult word to pronounce again. I think it's taphophobia. Which is the name given to a fear of being buried alive. And if you were actually buried alive, your most likely cause of death would obviously be asphyxiation, running out of oxygen in that enclosed space, and the fact that no more, no new oxygen can enter. So basically, you just fall asleep and then not wake up.
Basically, if you do decide to just give up. So the trick here would be, if you found yourself buried alive and you did think that there was chance of rescue, the trick here would be breathing slowly and calmly to use less of the available oxygen. It's the same technique if you're going diving and you've got a tank, because then you're using less oxygen. So obviously you'll hopefully survive for a bit longer. But this is obviously not an easy task if you're panicking about being buried alive. I mean, for the contestants, having a walkie-talkie and knowing that someone was coming to dig you out probably helped calm their breathing, perhaps.
I would imagine
compared
so,
to
having air pumped in and that kind of thing.
The risk assessment for that show must have been wild.
Can you imagine? So of course somebody's done the maths, because why wouldn't you? So on average, the volume of a person is around 66 litres, and the average casket would hold 886 litres. So that's 820 litres of space that can contain air. 20% of that air is oxygen. So that means you've got 164 litres of oxygen. I hope you followed that, everyone. So it's 164 litres of oxygen.
Right. Well, more numbers for you. Yeah. If you can breathe slowly and at a normal pace, then an average body will convert oxygen at a rate of 23 litres an hour. Obviously, this varies if you're like super fit or super unfit. But at 23 litres an hour, this gives you around 7 hours to be rescued. That's your window.
Now, do you know what? That's longer than I would have thought.
Well, I'll be very honest with you. There were lots of varying calculations on the internet. There were some that said kind of, you've got 5 hours tops. Some said very unoptimistically, you've got 10 minutes. Some people said up to kind of 10 hours. But either way, the agreement from scientists is it's not very long. It's really not very long at all. And obviously it depends on the size of the person and the size of the coffin. So if you're a small person buried in a big coffin, you've got a large volume of oxygen. But generally, I think if you're like really small, you're probably buried in I don't know.
Yeah, but the thing is and that's taking into account you being absolutely calm again, isn't it? Which might be why you get that varying amounts of time. So if you are not rescued, we breathe out carbon dioxide so slowly the space will be filled with that instead of oxygen. And then, as I said, you will black out and slip into a coma before your heart stops beating. And that's obviously what happens if you have carbon monoxide poisoning and things like that as well, isn't it?
I there's some hope in that sentence of just slipping away, but I think it still sounds a very horrible way to go. And the good news is it's not good. Even if you could open the lid, avalanche scientists have let us know that actually the heaviness of 6 foot of soil landing on you would immediately crush your chest. It would be impossible to expand. It would be impossible to breathe in. Just sit and wait for rescue, I think.
And don't panic.
You can't dig yourself out from under 6 feet.
Maybe write a novel. Do you think 7 hours is long enough to write a short story in a novel in your head? Maybe a
short story, perhaps.
Yeah.
Full novel. I'm not
sure. Novel, not so much. Short story in your head. Yeah. So that's we always end on something light and fun, and so I think we need something light and fun after that, don't we?
Let's go from being buried alive
to something else that was talked about and made headlines, or always makes headlines actually with Claudia, to be fair.
Wherever she goes.
Yeah.
Claudia Winkleman has the shiniest hair on television. That woman is never allowed to get a new hairstyle, I'm afraid. It's part of her brand. We should never see what her forehead looks like, quite frankly.
No.
So here we go. Let's talk about the science of shiny hair.
Yes. So when the global beauty and cosmetic industry is really, really large, and it's no surprise that shiny hair has been studied by scientists, of course, by quite a lot of scientists and lots of different companies. And let's start with the science of hair and then move on to the products and how they work with the hair. So first of all, we like shiny hair because it's perceived to be healthy. It's not knotted or tangled. It's not full of grease. And that's a real easy indicator of someone's overall health and also their hygiene regime as well. And shiny hair generally has got a smooth texture, not got split ends or damage. It's not been heat treated as badly or, bleaching, or if they have happened, then the hair's been looked after afterwards. So yes, that's why, we like shiny hair.
So hair itself is made up of layers of amino acids. They're all held together with chemical bonds. And the bit that you see emerges from the hair follicle. So this bit is the hair shaft, the emergent. And a lot of us know that actually it's largely made of a protein called keratin, which is also what we find in our nails.
Yes. And there's an inner layer called the medulla. And this can be thicker in different individuals. And there are elongated cortical cells that surround that medulla. And these are the ones that are filled with keratin filaments, and they all line up parallel with each other. And that cortex contains the pigment, and it's the part of the shaft that gives you the colour of your hair. So this kind of central core gives you the colour.
And then it's got another outer layer known as the cuticle. And this bit is hydrophobic. It protects the cortex. And if you look at it under a microscope, and you might have seen pictures of it in textbooks, I'm pretty sure I remember seeing that at school. It kind of looks like it's made up of these overlapping cells that look a little bit like fish scales. And when your hair is healthy, these all lie really nicely together and they form a very smooth surface. And it's the cuticle that allows that kind of the light reflection, which is what we see as shininess, but it also defines sort of how much friction there is between all of the hair shafts, which will make it easier for it all to lie nicely next to each other, make it easier to brush, and in Claudia's case, just make it look like a very effortless sort of long, sleek, kind of consistent mass of hair.
Yes, and it's one of the reasons why I don't know if you heard that kind of old old phrase or old wives' tale about brushing your hair 100 times, and that's all about getting all of those scales all going in the same direction.
Oh no, I hadn't heard that.
Yes. Yes.
I'd have no hair left. Much of my hair just falls out.
So this outer cuticle also protects from moisture loss from the cortex as well. So not only is it hydrophobic, so it's protecting you against water landing on your hair, it also protects water loss from inside the hair. And that hydration is really, really important for the hair to be flexible and for it to shine. So it needs that moisture inside there. But when we do things like using heat or chemicals on the hair, we can disrupt that surface, that cuticle, and it can lift up some of those scales, and it can make our hair dry and brittle and therefore less shiny.
So if you wanted to kind of permanently change your hair, so for example, getting a perm with waves or chemically straightening it or bleaching it, as we've mentioned, what you need to disrupt is this cortex layer, the second layer underneath the cuticle. But to do this, you need to be able to disrupt there's internal disulfide bonds that hold all of the proteins together. And that's why you need things like heat and chemicals in order to disrupt those. It's quite an aggressive process to cause like permanent. You say permanent change, but it's just permanent damage to your hair, really. Yeah.
So to get the Winkleman style shiny hair, the advice is you should stay away from heat styling that might damage the outer cuticle. And you should also wash and rinse your hair at a lower temperature as well.
It was quite funny researching this section because obviously you Google how to have shiny hair and it's just women's magazines like giving you all sorts of varied advice and trying to sell you product after product, but there are genuinely scientific articles talking about the shininess of hair, which is quite interesting. But yeah, so when it does come to the choosing kind of the styling of the products, I think we can hazard a guess that Claudia probably avoids things like sulfates and silicons because they will dry out your scalp, and that means that your scalp will be encouraged to kind of naturally create even more oil, and then you'll end up with a greasy buildup, and it just kind of causes a lot of chaos. And so she'll probably also avoid really thick conditioners as well, because they'll do the same thing. I mean, they're really good for like very thick hair, but if you have very thin hair, like a very thick conditioner can be really, really weighty and just, really, really nasty to your hair.
Yeah. So that's a nice note to finish on, isn't it? I think Claudia Winkleman's shiny hair.
It's made me just look at my backlit split end, very terrible hair.
Definitely need a bit of a clip. So that's it for today. Thank you very much. I hope you really enjoyed this episode. And if you really did, and this is the first time you've heard Small Screen Science, do go back and listen to our back catalogue. We've got loads of great shows like Friends, Line of Duty, Great British Bake Off, The Office, Derry Girls, Dracula, you name it, we've covered it.
and if we haven't covered it, drop us in the chat and let us know what you'd like us to talk about. We can always find some science behind every TV show. Or if not the chat, please do. You can get in touch with us on Twitter or Instagram. So we're on Instagram at Small Screen Sci Pod, and Twitter, which, let's be honest, we use the most, at Small Screen Sci. And that's where you can also keep up to date with any more of the live shows that we might have coming up this year. And you'll be the first to know when we release our next podcast series, of which this will be one.
Yes. So thank you very much for coming, and goodbye.
And thanks, Cardiff Science Festival. We'll see you soon.
Thank you. Bye.